My name's Clara Williams. I'm 33 years old. And last Thanksgiving, my father looked me dead in the eye and said, "Still counting other people's money?" Mom sighed. At least she has a job. I smiled. But that smile? It wasn't pride. It was pain. It was years of swallowing words that burned in my throat. It was the weight of being invisible in a room full of people who were supposed to see me. They had no idea that the bank teller they mocked, the daughter they pitted, the sister they dismissed, was the regional director managing $50 billion in federal reserves. $50 billion. But that night, they were about to find out. Before I tell you what happened when the Federal Reserve Chairman walked into our dining room, I need you to understand something. This story isn't just about me. It's about every single person who's been judged, diminished, reduced to a job title that someone else decided wasn't good enough. So subscribe now. Because what you're about to hear might just make you rethink how you judge people. And trust me, you'll never forget what happened next. I walked into my parents' house that Thanksgiving evening with my stomach already in knots. You know that feeling, don't you? When you're about to walk into a room where you know you'll be the smallest person there, not because of who you are, but because of who they think you are. The dining room was exactly as I remembered. Grand mahogany table, crystal chandelier catching the light, the smell of roasted turkey, and my mother's famous stuffing filling the air. It should have felt like home, but it didn't. It felt like a courtroom where I was always on trial. My siblings were already there. Michael, the corporate lawyer with his designer watch and his stories about closing million-dollar deals. Sarah, the pharmaceutical sales rep who wouldn't stop talking about her new BMW and the vacation home in the Hamptons. And then there was me, Clara, the one who worked at a bank. They laughed. They clinked glasses. They talked about promotions and bonuses and luxury renovations. And I sat at the far end of the table. Always the far end. The place where your voice doesn't quite carry, where you can smile and nod, and nobody really notices if you speak at all. Dad leaned back in his chair, that smug look on his face that I'd seen 1,000 times. The look that said he was about to say something he thought was funny, something that would get everyone's attention. "So, Clara," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Still playing cashier at the bank?" The table erupted in chuckles. Not cruel laughter, you understand. Just casual amusement. Like my life was a running joke they'd all agreed on years ago. I nodded. Politely. The way I always did. "Something like that, Dad. Something like that." God, those words tasted like ash in my mouth. Because what I wanted to say, what I should have said, was so much bigger. But I'd learned a long time ago that explaining myself to people who'd already decided who I was, it was pointless. It was exhausting. And honestly, part of me wanted to see how long they could keep this going before reality came crashing down. They thought I handled coins. They thought I counted bills and smiled at customers and went home to a tiny apartment to watch Netflix alone. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly imagine, was that I moved economies. I stabilized markets. I made decisions that affected millions of people across multiple states, decisions that kept banks from collapsing and businesses from failing. But sure, Dad, I'm still playing cashier. My phone buzzed on the table. The screen lit up. Federal Reserve, urgent. I flipped it face down, quickly, casually. But not before Dad saw it. He smirked. That infuriating smirk. "Work again, honey? On Thanksgiving? You're not that important." The pain of that moment, it wasn't sharp. It wasn't sudden. It was the dull, familiar ache of being unseen by the people who were supposed to know you best. The people who were supposed to be proud of you. I looked at him. Really looked at him. And I said, softly, calmly, "You'd be surprised, Dad." He laughed. They all laughed. And I sat there, wondering how it had come to this. Wondering when my family had become people I needed to prove myself to instead of people I could simply be myself with. Have you ever been underestimated by your own family? Have you ever sat at a table where your accomplishments were invisible, where your worth was measured by someone else's narrow definition of success? I want you to tell me, because I know I'm not alone in this. I know there are others out there who understand exactly what this feels like. Dinner continued. course after course, each one harder to swallow than the last. Michael started talking about his latest case, some corporate merger that made him sound like he was single-handedly reshaping the American economy. Sarah chimed in with stories about her sales records, about how she'd exceeded her quota for the 8th quarter in a row. Mom beamed. Dad nodded approvingly. And me? I sat there with my hands folded in my lap. Steady.
Composed.
Because that's what I'd learned to do. Compose myself. Hold the weight of their judgment without breaking, without screaming, without standing up and telling them exactly who the hell I was. I wasn't angry. Not really. Anger is hot and immediate and explosive. What I felt was colder than that. It was the accumulated weight of years of this. Years of being the daughter who didn't quite measure up. The one who'd chosen a safe career instead of an impressive one. The one who worked in a bank, such a boring, predictable, unremarkable choice. If only they knew. If only they understood that working in a bank meant I sat in meetings with the Federal Reserve Chairman. That I reviewed liquidity reports that determined whether regional banks could meet their obligations. That I managed crisis response protocols for financial emergencies that could trigger nationwide panic. But I didn't say any of that. I just sat there, cutting my turkey into small, precise pieces, chewing slowly, letting their words wash over me like rain. Mom, bless her heart, tried to mediate. She always did. It was her role in this family dynamic. The peacemaker. The one who tried to smooth over Dad's bluntness and my siblings' casual cruelty with gentle words and soft smiles. At least Clara's job is stable, she said, patting my hand. In this economy, that's worth something. Stable. God, that word. In my family, stable was code for boring. It was code for she's not ambitious enough. It was code for she'll never really make something of herself. Dad scoffed. Actually scoffed. Like the idea of stability being valuable was somehow laughable. Stable doesn't mean successful, he said, reaching for his wine glass. Your brother just made partner at his firm. Your sister's on track to be regional sales director by next year. Stability is fine, Clara, but it's not the same as achievement. Achievement. Success. Those words meant everything to my father. They were his religion, his measure of worth, his way of determining who mattered and who didn't. And apparently I didn't. I felt the weight of that judgment settling on my shoulders like a heavy coat. It wasn't new. I'd been wearing it for years. But on this night, in this moment, it felt heavier than ever. Stability. That's what they called failure in our family. But that stability, that boring reliability they dismissed so easily, was what kept nations afloat. It was what prevented economic collapse. It was what allowed people like my brother and sister to have jobs at all. But how do you explain that to people who've already decided you're not worth listening to?
My phone rang.
Not a buzz this time, a full ring. The tone I'd set for my executive assistant. I excused myself from the table. Quietly, politely, the way I always did. I'm sorry, I need to take this. Sarah rolled her eyes. On Thanksgiving? Really, Clara? I didn't respond. I just walked into the hallway, my heels clicking on the marble floor, and answered the call. Director Williams speaking. The title felt powerful in my mouth.
Real.
Substantial. Everything I wasn't allowed to be at that dinner table. Director, I apologize for the interruption, my assistant said. But we have a situation that requires your approval before the chairman arrives tomorrow. Tomorrow. The chairman was coming to my region tomorrow for an emergency meeting about interstate banking protocols. Yes, I said, my voice steady and professional. I'll review the liquidity report tonight. Send it to my secure device within the hour. Understood, Director. Thank you. I hung up and stood there in the hallway for a moment, just breathing, just existing in a space where I was seen for who I actually was, not who my family assumed I must be. From the dining room, I could hear their voices. Muffled laughter. The clink of silverware on china. And I realized something in that moment, something that hurt and liberated me at the same time. They didn't know me. Not really. They knew a version of me they constructed, a simplified narrative that fit their understanding of the world. And maybe that was okay. Maybe I didn't need them to know. Maybe the truth was mine to carry, quietly, until it revealed itself on its own terms. I stepped outside onto the back patio. The November air was cold, biting. My breath fogged in front of me, disappearing into the darkness. I pulled out my secure phone, the one I used for federal communications, and dialed my senior analyst. James, it's Williams. I need the consolidated report on regional liquidity positions. The chairman wants a full briefing before the interstate protocol meeting. From the window, I could see my family. They were watching me, curious,
Confused.
My father frowned, that same dismissive look on his face. Even from here, I could read his expression. Who calls her on Thanksgiving? She's not that high up. My sister turned to my brother, and even though I couldn't hear her, I could see her lips moving. I knew what she was saying. Something dismissive. Something diminishing. Probably another joke about overdrafts or customer complaints. Let them think what they want, I thought. Let them keep constructing their comfortable little narrative. Director, the international transfer clearance is pending your signature, James continued. We have $48 billion in cross-border stabilization funds waiting for authorization. $48 billion. Waiting for my signature. My approval. My decision. But sure, Dad. I'm just counting other people's money. Approved, I said. Send the confirmation to my device. I'll brief the chairman in person when he arrives. Understood, Director. Enjoy your evening. Enjoy my evening.
Right.
I stepped back inside, the warmth of the house enveloping me. My family was still at the table, but now they were all looking at me. Not with curiosity, with judgment. With that familiar mixture of pity and condescension. Sorry, everyone, I said, settling back into my seat. Just a little work emergency. Dad rolled his eyes. The gesture was so practiced, so casual, so completely dismissive of everything I was. Overdrafts again, he asked. The table chuckled. That same easy laughter. That same casual cruelty. I picked up my wine glass.
Took a slow sip.
Let the moment hang there. Something like that, I replied. God, the restraint it took to say those words. The control. The discipline. Because what I wanted to do was slam my glass down on that mahogany table and tell them exactly what that little work emergency was. Tell them that I'd just authorized a transfer of funds larger than their combined lifetime earnings. Tell them that while they were sitting here judging me, I was literally preventing an interstate banking crisis. But I didn't. Because some truths don't need to be shouted. Some truths are patient. They wait. They build. They reveal themselves when the time is right. And the time was coming. Oh, it was definitely coming. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. More stories from Michael about his cases. More bragging from Sarah about her sales numbers. More passive-aggressive comments from Dad about ambition and success and making something of yourself. And through it all, I sat there.
Calm. Composed.
Carrying the weight of my silence like armor. Because I knew something they didn't. I knew that tomorrow morning, the Federal Reserve Chairman would be in my city. I knew that my secure phone would ring at precisely 7 a.m. with final briefing notes. I knew that I would spend Thanksgiving evening reviewing economic reports that determine the financial stability of 7 states. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that the truth was about to walk through their door whether they were ready for it or not. Subscribe now so you don't miss what happens when truth walks through that door. You'll never forget it. I promise you that. We'd moved to the living room for coffee and dessert. My mother's famous pumpkin pie. Conversation had shifted to lighter topics, holiday plans, family gossip, the usual safe territory. I was starting to think I might make it through the evening without any more incidents when I heard it. The sound of engines. Multiple engines. The distinctive rumble of heavy vehicles on gravel. Everyone stopped talking. My father looked toward the window, his brow furrowed. Are we expecting someone? Mom asked. Before anyone could answer, headlights swept across the living room windows.
Bright.
Official looking. The kind of lights that meant business. I knew what was coming. I'd been half expecting it all evening. When you're at my level, work doesn't respect boundaries. Holidays, weekends, Family dinners. None of it matters when there's a crisis. But my family didn't know that.
Car doors slammed.
Footsteps on the driveway. And then the doorbell rang. A sharp, authoritative sound that made everyone jump. Dad stood up, confused and slightly irritated. I'll get it. I stayed seated.
Calm. Composed.
Because I knew exactly who was at that door. I heard Dad's voice, sharp with surprise. Can I help you? And then I heard the response. Professional.
Precise.
The kind of voice that doesn't ask, it informs. We're looking for Director Williams. Is she here? The silence that followed was deafening. Dad's voice uncertain now. Director? Director Clara Williams. Federal Reserve. We have an urgent situation that requires her immediate attention. I could hear the shock in the silence. The confusion. The sudden, dawning realization that something wasn't adding up with their comfortable narrative. I stood up, smoothed my dress, walked toward the door with the same steady composure I'd maintained all evening. My family followed me. All of them. Like children following something they couldn't quite understand. At the door stood 2 federal agents in dark suits, earpieces visible, postures rigid with professional authority. Behind them, 3 black sedans with government plates. And stepping out of the center vehicle, a man I recognized immediately, Special Agent Morrison, head of the chairman's security detail. Director Williams, he said, nodding respectfully. I apologize for the interruption on the holiday, but the chairman is requesting your presence immediately. We have a situation developing with the Chicago Federal Reserve Bank that requires your expertise. The words hung in the air like a bomb.
Director.
Federal Reserve. Your expertise. I glanced back at my family. My father's face had gone pale. His mouth was open, but no words were coming out. Mom's hand was pressed to her chest, her eyes wide with shock. Michael and Sarah looked like they'd been slapped. Of course, I said to Agent Morrison. Give me 5 minutes to gather my materials. Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am. He called me ma'am.
With respect. With deference. The kind of respect I'd been craving from my own family all evening. I turned to face them. All of them. Standing there in the doorway like strangers. Director? My mother whispered. The word came out broken, confused. Like she was trying to solve a puzzle she didn't know existed. I smiled. Softly. Not with triumph, with something sadder than that. With the resigned knowledge that this moment had been inevitable. Yes, Mom. Regional Director. Federal Reserve Bank. I oversee 7 states, manage reserve requirements for 347 banking institutions, and coordinate emergency response protocols for interstate financial crises. The silence was absolute. My father's voice, when it finally came, was barely audible. But you said you worked at a bank. I do work at a bank, Dad. The bank. The Federal Reserve. I have for the past 8 years. I started as an analyst, worked my way up through senior positions, and was appointed regional director 3 years ago. Sarah found her voice, shaky and uncertain. But you never said. You never asked, I replied. And God, those words hurt to say. They hurt because they were true. Because in 8 years, not one of them had ever asked me about my work beyond dismissive jokes and casual mockery. Not one of them had ever shown genuine interest in what I actually did. Michael stammered, the regional director, that's a presidential appointment. I finished. Confirmed by the Senate. Yes. I didn't need revenge. Standing there, watching their faces transform from smugness to shock to shame, that was enough. Their silence was louder than any apology they could ever offer. I need to go, I said quietly. There's a crisis situation that requires my attention.
Thank you for dinner, Mom.
It was enlightening. I walked past them, past Agent Morrison, toward the sedan. Behind me, I could hear my mother starting to cry. Soft, broken sobs. The sound of a mother realizing she'd failed to see her own daughter. Part of me wanted to turn back. To comfort her.
To tell her it was okay.
But it wasn't okay. And I was done pretending it was. The sedan pulled away from my parents' house, and I watched through the tinted windows as my family stood on the porch, silhouetted against the warm light from inside.
Small. Distant.
Already becoming a memory. Inside the car, I opened my secure tablet. The screen glowed with economic data, real-time financial feeds, emergency protocols waiting for my review. "Director, we have you patched into the emergency conference," Agent Morrison said from the front seat. "The chairman is standing by." I tapped the screen. Immediately, faces appeared, my senior staff, regional analysts, the chairman himself from his secure location in Washington. "Director Williams," the chairman's voice came through clearly. "Thank you for making yourself available on short notice." "Of course, Mr. Chairman. What's our situation?" And just like that, I wasn't Clara, the disappointing daughter, anymore. I was Director Williams, the person who made decisions that mattered, the person who held together systems that most people never even thought about. Chicago Federal Reserve is reporting unusual withdrawal patterns across 16 major institutions, my senior analyst James explained. "We're seeing coordinated movement that suggests either a significant hedge fund repositioning or a potential precursor to a run scenario. A bank run. The nightmare scenario. The thing that could trigger panic, collapse confidence, destroy economies." "Current reserve ratios?" I asked, my fingers already moving across the screen, pulling up data, analyzing patterns. Within acceptable parameters, but trending toward threshold levels. If this continues through the weekend, we could see critical shortfalls by Tuesday when markets reopen. I processed the information quickly. Years of training, years of experience, all condensed into rapid analysis and decisive action. "Activate the emergency liquidity protocol," I ordered. "Authorize supplementary reserves from the St. Louis and Cleveland banks. I want $50 billion in immediate transfer capability standing by." $50 billion. With my word. With my authority. "Director, that's a level 3 authorization," James cautioned. It requires my signature and the chairman's approval," I interrupted. "Which is why I'm conferencing with the chairman right now. Mr. Chairman, I'm recommending immediate activation of emergency protocols. We can't wait until Tuesday to respond to this." The chairman was quiet for a moment. In that silence, I could feel the weight of the decision. $50 billion in federal reserves, moved based on my assessment, my judgment, my expertise. "I concur, Director Williams," he said finally. "Authorization granted. Proceed with your recommendation." Just like that. Billions of dollars.
Moved. Deployed.
Stabilized. The car pulled up to my office building, a sleek high-rise in the financial district. Through the windows, I could see lights on multiple floors. My staff already assembled. Already working. Because when there's a crisis, we don't wait. We don't hesitate. We act. Agent Morrison opened my door. "Director, your team is standing by in the Secure Operations Center." I stepped out into the cold night air, my heels clicking on the pavement. Behind me, I knew my family was still standing on that porch, probably still in shock, still trying to reconcile the daughter they thought they knew with the reality of who I actually was.
But I didn't have time to think about that now.
I had work to do. Real work. Important work. I walked into the building, past security, into the elevator. Up to the 23rd floor where the operations center hummed with activity. Screens everywhere. Data streaming. My team, 15 of the best financial analysts in the country, all focused, all professional, all looking to me for direction. "Status update," I said, not breaking stride as I walked to the central command station. Numbers flowed. Analysis. Projections. The situation was serious but manageable. That's what I did. I managed the unmanageable. I found stability in chaos. I made the impossible decisions that kept the system functioning. For the next 6 hours, I was in my element. Reviewing reports. Authorizing transfers. Coordinating with other regional directors. Speaking directly with bank presidents. Making decisions that affected millions of people who would never know my name, never know what I'd done, never know that their money was safe because I'd been there in that room, doing the work that mattered. They measured success by houses and cars. by job titles that sounded impressive at dinner parties, by things you could show off, things you could brag about. I measured success by national stability, by crisis averted, by economies protected, by systems that kept functioning because I had done the hard, invisible, unglamorous work of keeping them alive. And you know what? I didn't need anyone to understand that. I didn't need my family's approval or recognition or pride. I had something better. I had purpose. I had meaning. I had the knowledge that what I did mattered in ways they couldn't begin to comprehend. I got home at 4 a.m. The crisis was contained. The transfers were authorized. The system was stable. I collapsed into bed still wearing my clothes, too exhausted to even change. My phone woke me 3 hours later. Not my work phone, my personal one. It was my father. I stared at the screen for a long moment, my thumb hovering over the answer button. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Part of me wanted to let him sit with his shame a little longer. But I answered. "Hello, Dad." His voice was different. Smaller. Uncertain in a way I'd never heard before. "Clara, can I come see you?" 20 minutes later, there was a knock on my apartment door. I opened it to find my father standing there, looking older than I'd ever seen him. His shoulders were slumped. His eyes were red. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside. He walked past me slowly, taking in my apartment. It wasn't grand, I didn't need grand. But it was mine. Tasteful. Comfortable. The kind of space that reflected who I actually was, not who anyone expected me to be. He stood in my living room, looking lost. Looking like he didn't know how to begin. Finally, he turned to me. "Clara, I owe you an apology." The words hung there. I'd imagined this moment before. Fantasized about it, honestly. About the satisfaction I'd feel hearing those words. But standing there actually hearing them, I felt something different. Not satisfaction. Sadness. A deep, aching sadness for all the years we'd lost to misunderstanding. "No, Dad," I said quietly. "You owe yourself perspective." He flinched like I'd hit him. I don't understand. Why didn't you tell us? Why did you let us think?" "Think what?" I interrupted. That I was just a bank teller? That I was unsuccessful? That I was the disappointing daughter? The pain in my voice surprised even me. "I told you I worked at the Federal Reserve, Dad. I told you I was in banking. I told you my work was important. You just never listened. None of you did." His eyes filled with tears. My father.
Crying.
I'd never seen it before. "You're right," he whispered. "We didn't listen. We didn't ask. We just assumed. And I'm so sorry, Clara. I'm so deeply, profoundly sorry. I wanted to be angry. Part of me was still angry. Angry at the years of dismissal, the casual cruelty, the constant undermining of everything I'd accomplished. But another part of me, a bigger part, was just tired. Tired of carrying this pain. Tired of needing their approval. Tired of fighting for recognition from people who should have given it freely. "I forgive you, Dad," I said. And I meant it. Not because he deserved it, but because I deserved to be free of the anger. But things have to change. All of you have to change. You have to start seeing people, seeing me for who we actually are, not who you assume we should be. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I will. I promise. We all will." An hour later, my mother arrived. Then Sarah. Then Michael. One by one they came. And one by one they apologized. Not performatively, genuinely. With real remorse. With real understanding of what they'd done. My mother hugged me, her whole body shaking with sobs. "We just didn't know, honey. We just didn't know." "I know, Mom," I said, holding her. "That's why I never tried to prove it. That's why I never forced it. I wanted you to see me, not my title. I wanted you to value me for who I was, not what I'd achieved." Sarah sat on my couch, her face in her hands. "I can't believe we were so blind. So cruel." "You were cruel," I said. "You were just limited. You measured success by the only metrics you knew. It's not your fault that those metrics were too small." Michael spoke last. I've been thinking about it all night, he said. About how I talk about my work. How much I define myself by my job. And I realize now that I was doing to you what I'm terrified of people doing to me, reducing you to a title, a position, a simple explanation that doesn't capture who you actually are. I sat down across from him. We all do it, Michael. We all reduce each other to simple narratives because real understanding takes work.
Takes time.
Takes vulnerability. And that's scary. We talked for hours. Really talked. Maybe for the first time in years, we actually saw each other. Not as roles in a family drama, not as symbols of success or failure, but as real people with complex lives and hidden depths. And slowly, painfully, something began to heal. Some lessons don't need shouting. They unfold in silence and in humility, in the quiet recognition that we've been wrong, that we've been blind, that we've hurt people we love through our own limited vision. My family had learned that lesson. And honestly, so had I. Because I realized that by keeping my achievements secret, by letting them mock me without correction, I'd been protecting myself from vulnerability. I'd been afraid that if they knew who I really was, they might still not care. And that would have been unbearable. But now we knew. We all knew. And we could start again, building something real on the foundation of truth instead of assumption. It's been a year since that Thanksgiving. A year since the moment that changed everything. And I've had a lot of time to think about what it all means. I'm sitting in my apartment now, same place, same view of the city skyline. The lights are beautiful at this time of night. Thousands of windows glowing, each one a life, a story, a person trying to make their way in this complicated world. I've been thinking about judgment, about how we measure people, about how easy it is to reduce someone to their job title, their salary, their visible achievements, and miss entirely the substance of who they are. If you've ever been judged by your title, your paycheck, your job, remember this. Their opinion can't shrink your purpose. It can't diminish your value. It can't erase the work you do, the lives you touch, the difference you make. I spent years feeling invisible in my own family. Years feeling like I wasn't enough because I didn't fit their definition of success. And you know what? That pain was real. That hurt was valid. But it was also based on a lie, the lie that their perception of me determined my worth. It doesn't. It never did. Your worth isn't determined by other people's recognition. It's not validated by their approval or their praise or their understanding. Your worth is inherent. It's built into who you are, what you do, how you move through the world. I manage billions of dollars in federal reserves. I prevent economic crises. I stabilize systems that affect millions of lives. And that work is important. It's meaningful. It matters. But you know what matters more? The way I treat people. The integrity I bring to my work. The compassion I'm learning to extend to others and to myself. We've all been underestimated. We've all been dismissed, overlooked, judged by superficial metrics that don't capture our true value. But we rise. We keep going. Not to prove them wrong, though sometimes that happens, but to prove ourselves right. To prove to ourselves that we are who we know we are, regardless of whether anyone else sees it. My family sees me now. Really sees me. And that's beautiful. That's healing. But the truth is, I didn't need them to see me to be whole. I was always whole. I was always enough. Their blindness was their limitation, not mine. If you're carrying the pain of being underestimated, of being dismissed, of being invisible to people who should see you, I want you to know something. You're not alone. And you're not wrong about your worth. You're right.
You've always been right.
Keep doing your work. Keep being who you are. Keep showing up with integrity and purpose and passion. And trust that the truth reveals itself in time. Sometimes dramatically, sometimes quietly, but always inevitably. It's Thanksgiving again. 1 year later. I'm walking up the same driveway, the same house, the same family. But everything is different. Dad opens the door before I can knock. He hugs me, really hugs me, and says, "There's someone I want you to meet." Inside, there are guests, friends of the family, people I've known casually for years, but never really connected with. Dad puts his hand on my shoulder. A gesture of pride, of ownership in a way that should bother me but somehow doesn't, because it's genuine now. This is my daughter, Director Williams. She runs the Federal Reserve operations for 7 states. There's pride in his voice. Real pride. The kind I used to crave and now receive with mixed feelings because I know it's based on achievement rather than character. But it's progress. It's growth. It's him trying. The guests are impressed. They ask questions. They want to know about my work, my responsibilities, my career path. And I answer, but I keep it brief. Because I've learned something important this year. I don't need to prove myself anymore.
Not to them.
Not to anyone. It's just a job, I say with a smile. An important one, sure. But it's not who I am. It's just what I do. My mother squeezes my hand under the table. She understands. She sees what I'm saying, that I'm bigger than my title, more than my position, deeper than any label anyone could apply. Dinner is different this year. We talk about real things. Vulnerabilities. Challenges. The messy, complicated truth of our lives rather than the polished, performative highlights. Michael talks about his struggles with work-life balance. Sarah admits she's been questioning whether her career is really fulfilling. Mom shares her own story of feeling invisible as a stay-at-home mother when all anyone wanted to talk about was their careers. And I realize that we're all learning the same lesson in different ways. That we're all more than our roles, bigger than our achievements, deeper than our public presentations. As the evening winds down, I stand at the window again, looking out at the same view I looked at a year ago when everything changed. Dad joins me. We stand in comfortable silence for a moment. Thank you, he says quietly. For what? I ask. For being patient with us. For giving us a chance to see you. Really see you. I turn to look at him. This man who raised me, who disappointed me, who hurt me, and who is now trying, really trying to do better. You didn't need to thank me, Dad. We're family. That's what family does. We hurt each other, we fail each other, and then we choose to try again. He nods, his eyes glistening. I'm proud of you, Clara. Not because of your title or your position. I'm proud of who you are, of your grace, your strength, your capacity to forgive. Those words, God, those words, they're the ones I needed all along. Not pride in my achievements, but pride in my character, in who I am at my core. Thank you, Dad, I whisper. That means more than you know. Later, as I drive home through the quiet streets, I think about the journey I've been on, the pain I've carried, the anger I've held, the truth I've protected, and I realize something profound. I never wanted a title. I never wanted recognition for the sake of recognition. I never wanted to prove myself in some dramatic revelation that put everyone else to shame. What I wanted was so much simpler and so much harder to get. I wanted respect. Real respect. The kind that sees you as a whole person, not a job description. The kind that values your character as much as your accomplishments. The kind that exists whether you're managing billions of dollars or working a cash register. And sometimes the two arrive together. The title and the respect. The achievement and the recognition. But they're not the same thing. They never were. The title came first for me. I earned it through years of work, of dedication, of proving myself in rooms where I was often the only woman, the youngest person, the underestimated one. But the respect? The real, deep, meaningful respect from the people who mattered most? That came later. That came through pain and revelation and the hard work of rebuilding relationships on a foundation of truth.
And you know what?
I wouldn't change it. Not the pain, not the years of being invisible, not even that awful Thanksgiving dinner where I sat at the end of the table feeling like nothing. Because all of it brought me here, to this moment, to this understanding. If you've ever turned pain into power, if you've ever been underestimated and risen anyway, if you've ever held your truth quietly while the world judged you wrongly, your story matters. Your journey matters. You matter. Not because of what you've achieved, though that matters too, but because of who you are, the strength you carry, the dignity you maintain, the grace you extend even when it's hard. I'm Clara Williams. I'm 33 years old. I'm a regional director at the Federal Reserve. But more importantly, I'm a daughter who learned to forgive. A sister who learned to be vulnerable. A woman who learned that her worth isn't determined by other people's recognition. And if my story reaches even one person who's sitting at their own dinner table, feeling invisible, feeling dismissed, feeling like they're not enough, I want you to hear this. You are enough. You've always been enough. Their inability to see you doesn't diminish your light. It just means they're not looking in the right direction yet. Keep shining. Keep working. Keep being exactly who you are. Because the truth always finds its way out. Sometimes it walks through the door in a federal agent's uniform. Sometimes it arrives in a quiet apology. Sometimes it unfolds over years of slow, painful growth. But it always comes. And when it does, you'll be standing there, still whole, still strong, still you. That's not just my story. That's our story. Every single one of us who's ever been underestimated, overlooked, reduced to something smaller than we are. We rise. Not with anger, though anger has its place. Not with bitterness, though bitterness is understandable. We rise with quiet dignity, with persistent purpose, with the unshakable knowledge that we are more than anyone else's limited vision of us.
And that
is power. Real power. The kind that doesn't need validation or recognition or dramatic reveals. Though I'll admit, sometimes those dramatic reveals are pretty satisfying too.
Subscribe.
Share this story. Tell me your story. Because we're all in this together. All of us walking through a world that constantly tries to reduce us, label us, limit us. And together, we're proving that we're so much more than that. So much more than they could ever imagine. My name is Clara Williams. And this is the story of the Thanksgiving that changed everything.